Sandra, joining us now by phone is Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz, a member of the Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, we believe that we're about 20 minutes away from the president speaking. When he takes to the podium there at the White House, what do you want to hear come out of his mouth regarding this situation?
Well, we need strength and we need resolve. The reason that Russia has invaded Ukraine is because of catastrophic mistakes made by President Biden and Vice President Harris. There are two causes in particular that put us in this situation. Number one, last year, when we withdrew from Afghanistan, the absolutely catastrophic withdrawal, incompetently executed, every enemy of America across the globe looked at America and was emboldened. They looked at the Oval Office and they took a measure of the man in the Oval Office, and unfortunately they concluded that the president was weak and feckless and ineffective. And as I said at the time, the chances of a Russian invasion of Ukraine have just increased tenfold. And also, every bit as troubling, the chances of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan have increased tenfold. Secondly, with respect to Russia and Ukraine in particular, President Biden made an enormous mistake when he waived the sanctions on Nord Stream 2, the pipeline that Putin was building to get his natural gas to Europe without having to go through Ukraine. I authored bipartisan sanctions that passed Congress, that President Trump signed into law, and we had stopped the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which is what prevented a Russian invasion of Ukraine. President Biden decided instead, for political reasons, to surrender to Russia, to waive those sanctions. He allowed Putin to complete that pipeline. That was an enormous mistake. And thankfully, yesterday, after over a year of my battling him in the Senate to try to get these sanctions imposed, Joe Biden finally did the right thing and imposed sanctions on Nord Stream 2. It's the right decision, but far too late, because Putin doesn't believe it's credible, doesn't believe it will stay, which means what we need to see from Biden today is a promise. Not only are we sanctioning Nord Stream 2, but those sanctions are permanent. I'm going to be introducing legislation in Congress to take away Biden's ability to waive those sanctions, because if Putin genuinely believes that Nord Stream 2 will not go online, that is the single best deterrent we can have to preventing a full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah. Senator, I know you've spoken up on that before in the days leading up to this, and you suggested that we need to go beyond sanctioning the pipeline itself and the project itself. You want to sanction the companies involved, which involves a lot of European companies that would clearly want to push back on that. I want to ask you what all the way up means, because Mitch McConnell says that we should be ratcheting sanctions in this moment all the way up. How far do you want to see Joe Biden go when he speaks 15 minutes from now?
Well, the principal target of the sanctions is a company called Nord Stream 2 AG, which is the company that owns and operates the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and its principal officers as well. And Nord Stream 2 AG is a Swiss company that is wholly owned by Gazprom, the giant Russian energy company. That is who Biden should have sanctioned. That is who Biden waived sanctions on. That is who, just a few weeks ago, I forced a vote on the Senate to impose sanctions, and I won a big bipartisan vote, 55 to 45, in favor of those sanctions, including 6 Democrats. But unfortunately, Democrats filibustered the bill. They demanded 60 votes, and so it didn't pass. And that was because 44 Democrats in the Senate gave in to political pressure from the White House and decided to vote with Russia, with Putin, instead of protecting U.S. national security. Now, just yesterday, Biden realized the error of his ways. I offered him a deal. I had placed a hold on every State Department nominee from the Biden administration, and I had offered for a long time to lift those holds if he would follow the law and impose the sanctions. Yesterday, President Biden accepted my deal, imposed those sanctions, which he should have done a year ago. And as a result, I lifted my holds. But here's the problem. Putin, looking at this, doesn't believe that Biden will hold the line. He believes that Biden will once again waive the sanctions when the immediate urgency passes. So if we want to stop an invasion, we ought to listen to Ukraine. The leaders of Ukraine have told us the two most effective things to stop an invasion are, number one, immediate sanctions on Nord Stream 2, and number two, providing the Ukrainian people with lethal defensive weaponry so they can defend themselves. Not Americans defending them. We don't want American soldiers fighting Russians, but we should be continuing to provide the Ukrainians the weapons so they can defend themselves.
Hey, Senator, it's John again. In terms of the Ukrainians mounting a defense, clearly they are committed patriots and they want to defend their land, but against 150 to 190,000 Russian troops and mechanized divisions, that is going to be a tough fight. But let me ask you this question. If Putin's goal is, as he has suggested, to change the regime in Kiev to, I guess, really wind the clock back to pre-2014 to a government that is pro-Russian, and he says, I'm leaving now, and he takes his troops and he goes home, but he leaves that government there, what in effect, could the United States and its NATO and European Union allies do about it? We can sanction Putin all we want. We can try to cut off his oil and gas, but Europe is wholly dependent on that, or at least to a large degree, and they're probably not going to want to continue sanctions if there doesn't appear to be an imminent military threat.
So, John, that is heavy question on your part. I think that is likely going to be Putin's end game. I just released, I do a podcast every week called Verdict with Ted Cruz, and my latest in Ukraine and where it's likely to go. And I think Putin's plan is what you just suggested, to invade, to go all the way to Kiev. I expect that we will see tanks in the streets of Kiev, which I've been predicting for a year as a result of Biden's policies. But then I think his end game will be to negotiate a retreat and put in place a puppet leader like he had prior to 2014 who will follow his orders. I think that is a very bad outcome. The people of Ukraine want to be allied with America. They want to be allied with Europe and the West. They don't want to be under Russian domination. And so I think the answer is not military conflict from the American military, but rather using the economic tools we have to increase the price for Putin to carry out this assault. It may be too late. At this point, Biden's weakness has provoked this assault. And I got to say, John, a few weeks ago, we had a briefing of all 100 senators, and one of the Democratic senators stood up and asked a question of the Secretary of State, said, why did Russia not invade Ukraine in 2017? Why did he not invade in 2018, in 2019, in 2020? And I have to admit, several of us laughed out loud because the answer was self-evident. You had a president, President Trump, who was strong, who Russia didn't want to mess with, who had signed the sanctions legislation on Nord Stream 2, and we had the law in place that had shut that pipeline down. If we're going to deter aggression, the only way to do so is with strength, not weakness. And unfortunately, the Biden White House doesn't understand that principle.